the baby in 9 months. And all that was happening in the present moment. And every cell has consciousness. Every cell has that spark of awareness. And they're all tied together in the internet, what I call the inner internet. You all know about the outer internet, right? Now they have this iCloud and all that. But the inner internet is that network of cells that communicate with each other and to the inner wisdom that has developed this baby, this highly evolved human organism with all of its intricate life support systems and inner wisdom. The body knew how to make itself. And it knows how to heal itself to a large extent with the immune system and, all these other kind of interrelated systems. If you cut your finger, the body knows how to, to stop the bleeding with some, scabs, blood clots. Bacteria comes in the body, it knows how to go and gobble up those bacteria, and it knows how to regulate everything. So that's called natural wisdom. That happened without the aid of IBM computers, without artificial intelligence. That's real intelligence, by the way. So all that happened, and it was occurred in the present moment, and the mind was fused into the body. There's no separation between body and mind, really. Awareness. Now, of course, the baby in the womb is not having complex thoughts and thinking like we know it now, right? But there was awareness anyway. But what happens at the time of when the baby's born? What's the first thing that happens when the baby comes out of the womb? Yeah, maybe even before that. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but doctor takes out his scissors and cuts the cord. Now the baby gets separated from the mother and the life force, and then they give it a name. Even before it comes out, parents give names, right? And as soon as it comes out, they rush over with birth certificate. What's his name? What's his name? We've got to write it down. And of course, then it starts breathing and all that, and breathing and the heart beating. But essentially, that baby's mind, when it first comes out, it's still in the present moment. Because for 9 months, that all it knew was that powerful energy of cell division and this creating this body that was going on in that confined little space. Or 9 months, that basically all it knew is by feeling that when the heart started beating inside, it was that's all it could feel. It was natural organic vibrations. And when it comes out, its mind is still connected to the body. And it doesn't know anything really. Doesn't have really any memory. It looks around, it sees things, but it doesn't know what anything is. Doesn't know what the doctor is, doesn't even know what his mother is. Although when it starts nursing with milk, that's a source of food. But anyway, then the parents give it a name, and then they start calling the name all the time. And the neighbors come over and hold the baby and, gucci, gucci, goo, and giving all this attention, calling its name, maybe for several months. I don't know how long it takes. You got any mothers out there who've timed this? How long does it take after the baby's born, after you've been calling its name for many weeks and months, that finally it turns its head? Huh? Any of you tested that out? They had to do some research about that. That's really good research, They research a lot of other stuff that's useless, but that would be a good research. So let's say after some months, finally, The baby turns its head when the name is called. And then it's slowly starting to think that, oh, this thing has a name. Little Mohan, little Susie, whatever, they're calling the name. And then people are coming over and holding it and calling the name. And what used to be oceanic awareness, when the baby's first born up to about 6 months, according to child developmental psychologists, the baby's mind still is in kind of an oceanic awareness. I mean, it's very expanded. It doesn't have the sense of me looking out the eyeballs. It's just awareness is very expansive, and it feels things. It feels pleasure and pain, and maybe you tickle it and it giggles, but these are just kind of instinctual reactions, kind of animal reactions. But little by little, you start teaching it language. That's mommy, that's daddy, that's Fido, that's Kitty, and it starts now to give objective status to, objects that it sees. And then some of those objects cause it a pleasurable feelings, and some of them cause it a painful feelings. Say, the sweet grandmother comes over and gives the baby its first chocolate, and they, touch the tongue on the chocolate and get a big grin on the face because, it gives some pleasurable feeling. And this is one example, right? Okay. And then maybe somebody else holds the baby too tight or squeezes it too tight and causes some discomfort to the baby. Or maybe the cat goes by and the baby reaches out to grab the tail and the cat turns around and scratches, causing pain. Now the baby's identifying this black furry thing as a source of pain. And then little by little, this is happening with everything it comes into contact with, whether it's sounds, visible objects, smells, tastes, feelings on the body. When it suckles its mother's breast to get milk, it probably have a pleasurable feeling arises. But other times when the diapers are full of crud, it causes an unpleasant feeling, and so on. So it starts to identify now these objects are a source of pleasure, and these other objects are a source of pain. And so it wants the objects to bring pleasure or comfort. It starts to want those again and again. And it starts to have fear or anxiety about the objects that brought it pain not to come again. So this is how the past and the future are born in the mind. The past and the future are mental inventions. We think they're somehow out in the past or in the future, some physical places or whatever. No, they're created in the mind. And it's based on pleasurable feeling and painful feeling. Because this conditioning, because the brain is developing, right? And the brain is making all these connections and so on, creating neural pathways based on the reactions to pleasurable feeling and painful feeling. Wanting to get a hold of pleasurable feeling or keep it if it has it, it's to hold on tight, not to let go. And a painful feeling comes, it's quick to want to get rid of it. And the fear of it coming again in the future. So thoughts of greed and wanting come into the mind to get things that you don't have now, and to keep away from the painful objects, to not have them come again in the future. And basically the whole life starts to revolve around this. And and then all of our actions that we take, the things that we decide to do, almost all of them are decisions based on wanting to get away from painful feeling and to acquire some pleasant feeling. Now, even in your meditation practice, how many times in your meditation practice do you move and change your posture? Hmm? Anybody? Did you count the number of times you might have moved? I saw some in the front moving quite a lot. And why was that? You won't admit it, but it was because you wanted to get away from a painful feeling arising and you were seeking comfort. And you can apply that to almost everything you do. You get a painful feeling of hunger. So you decide, I'm going to go to the fridge and get some food. Then if somebody ate the last of your favorite food, then anger arises. Why did they eat my food? And so we can see that our whole life and the whole mind is driven, and all of our thoughts and desires are based on that. And why is the reason for that? Because we become separated from the body. Now, the baby, when it's in the womb and when it comes out, it's, babies are smiling a lot, right? You ever seen babies smile? Why are they smiling? You don't know why they're smiling. But they're just smiling. Because its mind is in the present moment. When the mind is in the present moment, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to compare. There's nothing to judge. There's nothing to want. There's nothing to hate. And it's just in the present moment. And that's why it is content for the most part. And basically happy. But then once the baby starts crawling around and starts wanting this and that, and you slap the baby's hand and say, no, you can't have that. Or you take it away from how strong do they hold that object? Kids, young kids. You gotta take something away from them. It's holding on to that object. That's the source of its happiness. So, that's the way we've all been, everybody, grows up in that condition. And the reason is the mind has become disconnected from the source of happiness, the source of the present moment, which is the natural consciousness, and is now dependent on the future for its happiness and worrying about things coming from the past. And it's lost that connection to the present moment. And most people's minds are a step ahead of itself. How many of you in walking meditation this morning caught yourself thinking about something, in the future and temporarily forgot your steps? Or even in the sitting meditation itself. Your body is sitting here breathing, but how many times did your mind go to the past or future? Be interesting to be able to count them up. There'd be too many to count. Because that's simply the habit that we've allowed our brain to get into, because we've learned that from our parents, our brothers and sisters, schoolmates, teachers. Everyone's talking about the past and the future. And so the mind is, got caught into that. Now, there's nothing wrong necessarily with, relatively speaking, okay, there is the future and the past. And we have to think about it to some extent, but not to the extent of obsessing about it, getting so depending on putting all of our eggs in the basket about getting something in the future, when because of impermanence, we can't always get what you want. And then we suffer because we're depending on those objects in the future for our happiness, rather than staying more grounded and centered in the body and feeding off the happiness of feeling that organic aliveness in your body. Now, when I mentioned that this morning in one of the meditations, or when you're doing yoga, how many people could feel some kind of what I call subtle body sensations that were quite pleasant? or just, kind of watching and feeling them, you know, you were quite content for, at least that minute or two. Anybody experience that? But then when you started thinking about something, it took you out of that, right? So that is kind of proof for yourself in meditation to observe the body and mind and how it's changing, uh, to understand this phenomenon. And when the mind is resting in the present moment, and grounded in the body, feeling those subtler sensations, that it's pretty much content. But when you come out of that, then the mind is no longer content, and it wants something else. And that's why the becoming disconnected from the body is really the the, the beginning of suffering, and the ultimate cause of suffering, the deepest cause of suffering, is being disconnected from the present moment, because that's what we were born with. Uh, Even though the cause of suffering is craving, but what you crave is something in the future. So craving and being lost in the future is basically the same thing. And this is what the Buddha understood. That because we've lost that connection to the present moment and the body, we've had to bring happiness in from outside, bring things from the outside inside to create some pleasurable feeling, because we become disconnected from the natural pleasant feeling that comes from being more grounded in the present moment, in which the body is the only vehicle, the only thing we have a direct connection with. So if you become disconnected from the body, then you start needing things for your pleasure. And if you don't have the means to satisfy that pleasure lawfully, you might take to unlawful means, hurting others, hurting yourself, taking drugs, intoxicating the mind, uh, other kinds of crimes in order to get the objects of your desires, thinking that that's going to make you fulfilled. Uh, it's and then we get caught in the law of karma. We start killing, lying, cheating, stealing, raping, pillaging, plundering, and getting involved in all kind of vices and other sort of corruptions, substances abuses, addicted to foods and music and all these things that interfere with the body's natural function and disturb its ability to heal itself. And this is uh, important, when we were young, like especially when you're a teenager. I speak from my own experience. You pick up bad habits, and so maybe you're hanging out with a group of tough guys or girls, and an older one says, "Yeah, have your first puff of cigarette, or your first joint or something." But talk cigarettes because in my days, in my time of growing up, drugs weren't really around at that time, and it was cigarettes. So you just start smoking a cigarette because of peer pressure. Usually, it's because of that, or you start using bad language. Or you start using other body language that you pick up, and then that starts creating a problem. But let's stay with the smoking. So after 3 or 4 months, the body starts going. So what's that telling you? What's the body telling you? Trying to tell you that that's not good for me. You start to light up a cigarette and the body's kind of, saying, don't do that, don't do that. And the mind says, shut up. Right? So even though we want to be happy, free from suffering, we're doing the various things that cause us suffering. Simply because we've lost that connection with the body and the natural wisdom that comes from being grounded and centered in the present moment. So the Buddha understood all this, and that's why in his teachings he talked about, in the truth of suffering. He, you've all heard the first noble truth that the suffering exists, right? Well, there's 3 levels of suffering. There's the physical level of suffering that comes from being born, and then we're subject to getting sick, diseases, getting your bones broken, uh, growing old, and eventually dying, and all the various sufferings that comes with that, and the mental suffering that comes with that. We grieve and worry and fear about getting old, getting diseases. Now, with the knowledge about DNA, people are worrying. Oh my gosh, my mother, my grandmother had this or that disease. Am I going to get that? I better send my DNA in and get my genome. Or is it going to do any good? Well, it might. uh, anyway, so but people are worrying and fearing about the future. Uh, because they're caught in that and obsessing about it, things that you can't really control. So anyway, so that's the suffering that comes from the material world and having a body. And then there's not getting what you want and getting what you don't want. And this is connected with impermanence, that everything changes. So even if you get something that you want, it's going to change fairly quickly or get stolen or get burned or swept away in a flood, or you may just change your mind about it even and not want it anymore. And so we need to get something else. And so that's the not getting what you want and getting what you don't want. That's a mental level of suffering more in the mind, not being content with the present moment. And then the third level of suffering is called the suffering of ignorance. That means not knowing the truth and not knowing how the body and mind operates. So the Buddha said, in short, it's the 5 aggregates of clinging that are suffering because we cling to them as me. And those objects are the body and the mind and its thoughts, memories, and even its sense of self. Because we don't understand it, we suffer on account of it. So that's why it's called the suffering of ignorance, not knowing the truth. Uh, so these 3 levels of, of suffering that really pervade our whole life. But it comes from not knowing the truth about the mind, not knowing the truth about the Dhamma. So this is why the right understanding in the Buddha's teaching is, the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path is gaining a clear understanding of the teachings of the Dhamma. Again, this is the Dhamma teachings. And it's, has a very clear focus on these 4 noble truths. But it starts there with understanding the truth about the nature of desire and aversion, and that the cause of suffering is the craving and desire for the future, for pleasurable feeling, being caught in the tug of war between trying to search out and get things that we want, or have fear or worry and planning, scheming how we're going to get away from things that we don't want, even to the extent of breaking precepts, even people kill others, not because they don't want them to come around. So that's why the Buddha, started his teachings about mindfulness and meditation. He understood this connection, that it was losing that connection with the present moment that started this whole process, bala wax starting. And it's because no one taught us. When you were a young teenager, did your mother or father ever tell you, hey, don't lose contact with your body. Keep the body in the back of your mind. Feel the body. Stop every hour for a minute. Remember, yes, sitting, breathing, feel the body. Anybody teach you that? Why? Why not? It's so obvious, isn't it? Did the doctor, when you came out of the womb, did he say, hey, baby, keep hold of your body now. You got it now, but don't lose it. For the priests in the church? Or the politicians? So no one ever taught us this. Except people like the Buddha or other enlightened sages. So that's why he started his basic teaching about meditation in mindfulness of the body. Learn how to get reconnected to the body. Because look, we have it with us 24/7, right? From the moment you're born to the moment you die, the body's with you 24/7, 365. What's the last number? We don't know the last number because we don't know how many years we're going to live, right? But if we have to carry this body around with us 24/7, 365, why not use it for a good purpose? Instead of winning Mr. America contests or Miss Universe contests or whatever, getting gold medals in the Olympics. And I'm not denigrating these things. I'm just trying to make a point, right? Instead of using it for fame and fortune, why don't you use it to gain happiness, to develop your consciousness? That's the question. And so that's why the whole teaching of the Dhamma is about learning how to get reconnected to the present moment, because that's the end of suffering, when your mind has become totally reconnected to the present moment and has transcended those dualities that I mentioned this morning. Mind is no longer caught in past or future, no longer disturbed by pleasure or pain, no longer caught between self and others. It's been liberated. And that's the state of, paramam sukham, the highest happiness. Isn't that right, Bhante? Paramam sukham. Nibbānam paramam sukham. And that's not after death. That's while living still. So anyway, so the mindfulness of the body teaching is about how to getting reconnected to the body and learning how to live more, more continuously in the present moment. It doesn't mean you can't think about the past or future, but it means not obsessing about it and just living how to just to stay more grounded and centered, not worrying so much about the past and the future. So is the Buddha treated meditation as a scientific experiment, you could say. So he wanted to find the truth. So you might have known, if you're familiar with the life of the Buddha, he went out searching for the truth. And he went around asking these quasi-holy men who claim to know the truth, asking them, how do I reach the end of the world? Or, what is the ultimate truth? Some of them said, why don't you sit down here and just think about infinite space and try to get your mind, into a self-created hypnotic state of infinite space or infinite consciousness or these formless jhanas where your mind would become full of light or become like infinity and like, wow, like really mind-blowing, When the Buddha came out of those experiences, his mind went back to operating in a normal condition and thought, how can that be ultimate truth? So he didn't get trapped by those meditations, and he went to somebody else and they told him how to get a higher teaching. And the same thing happened. Somebody else taught him a little bit higher state of meditation, but he practiced that and came out of it, realized that he hadn't changed. So he said, why should I go around asking others? So he said, I'm a human being, they're a human being, I'm a human being. Why do I have to go ask another human being? And so that's when he vowed to, sit down under the Bodhi tree and look within himself and became a scientist with this scientific attitude. What is the nature of consciousness? What is the source of suffering? I mean, this is what scientists do, right? All their research, find a cure for cancer, find a cure for Alzheimer's, find a cure for all these diseases. That's what they do, isn't it? And you call them scientists, right? So why can't we call the Buddha a scientist? He wanted to find the cause of the ultimate disease. And the ultimate disease is ignorance, not knowing the truth. Because the mind is ill at ease. It's not satisfied with the present moment. It wants the future, or it's fearing or worrying about the past. So it's ill at ease. It's not content. You can't just sit here for hours and hours and be totally just happy by itself. I've got to do something. So that's what the Buddha was interested in. So he sat down like a scientist. And he started noticing the most obvious thing that came in, which was his breathing. And he started just listening to that, feeling the breath go in, feeling the breath go out, feeling the sensations. And then that brought him into the body, and then he started feeling all these other body sensations, how they're always changing. And as he stayed concentrated, he started to notice how his mind stopped thinking about the past and the future, and he developed deep states of concentration, feeling these subtle sensations, and he noticed that the mind became really, really happy. And then he used that to further develop insight into impermanence and ultimately no self. But anyway, that was his, he had a scientific approach to it. And that's why when you sit down to meditate, you should have the idea that, you're a scientist. And the body is the laboratory. And the mind is our microscope. So how many of you took college lab in college? Physics lab, chem lab, biology lab. So you usually had to go to the lab, right? So where's the lab? You get your paper the first day of school. Oh, biology lab, room, B101. So you go find the building and you walk on down the hall to room 101. biology lab, physics lab, whatever it is. Are you going to stare at the doorknob? What do you got to do? Hmm? You have to open the door and you have to go inside. Then you have to sit down at a table with a microscope and start looking down through the microscope. So the same way, whenever you come to meditate, you should have the idea, I'm coming to the laboratory. And you sit down and feel the posture. Try to mentally feel the posture, the sensations, try to feel the outline of the sitting body. Feel the hands touching together, the buttocks pressing the seat, clothing touching your skin. You found the outer body. You found the door of the lab. And then you start, the only thing that goes in and out of the body basically is air. So air coming from outside strikes the edge of the body, goes inside. So you're aware of that sensation or the stomach. You feel the expanding of the stomach. You feel the subtle sensations of expanding and contracting. That's opening the door and starting to feel something under the skin. First, you get to the outer body, you feel the outer sensations. Buttocks pressing the seat, clothing touching the skin. But if you keep your attention there longer, then you'll start to feel things under the skin, so to speak, subtler sensations. And then you start watching those, feeling those. And you start noticing more and more coming from different places. And that's the development of mindfulness of the body. So the Buddha went from just watching the breathing to being aware when I'm sitting, know that you're sitting. How do you know that you're sitting? Because of the sensations of it, the way your legs are crossed, the way the spine is straight. Because that's different than standing, isn't it? And walking is different than standing. Every posture of the body, that's how you know the body's in a posture, because of the sensations that you've learned over. But anyway, so, that's the present moment. And then when you're, moving, bending, stretching, you're aware of those movements. That's all about keeping the mind in the present moment. So, and you can even reach, a deep state of concentration just on that mindfulness of the body. And it gets you to the present moment because, as I've already mentioned, the body is always in the present moment. And you start feeling all the, you're going deeper inside. So you might feel the expanding and contracting of the clothing rubbing against the skin, the outer body. But as you stay focused, letting go of your thoughts, then you might start feeling the heartbeat, or you might start feeling the pulse, or the little tingling sensations in your hands and fingers, or the pulse of blood in different places, or other little kind of different sensations, prickly sensations, itchy sensations. And so, you're going deeper, under the skin or inside. And as you're able to keep your attention focused more inside, the things going on around outside are not stinging you so much. You start caring about sounds coming and going in the background because now they seem like more far away. Or even little itches on the outside of your body that you might have felt, or little aches and pains. You can endure them a lot longer now because your mind is now disconnected from those sources. And so the more that you can feel, the more and more subtle sensations you can notice and feel in the body, then you stop reacting to the other types of things, and it makes your mind very bright and alert, so you overcome all sleepiness. Sleepiness comes because we're not interested in anything. Oh, I can't feel my breathing. So you have to create the conditions where you have something interesting for the body to feel. And that's why we do the yoga exercises, because that's the most immediate and direct way of creating a pleasurable feeling in the body that then the mind wants to feel. And and then that helps you to develop deeper and deeper levels of concentration. And it also puts you in direct contact with your thoughts, because thoughts are arising at the same level of the subtle body vibration, because they're coming from the unconscious mind. Right now, in your ordinary state, you can't feel all those sensations that I was mentioning, like in the yoga, right? That's because they're operating at a deeper level, on a more unconscious level. But the moment you bring your attention to the body and kind of get under the skin, and bam, they're there. You're not creating them. They're already there. And that's the level where your thoughts are starting to come up from too. So this is the deal. You know, this is the progress. Is by deliberately tuning into subtler body sensations, and we have billions of them going on in the body all the time. Then by watching those, when a thought comes up, you'll see it more clear. Thoughts are rising. You'll notice, I thought about my mother coming into the mind, or thought about yesterday, or whatever. And you can kind of just note, thinking. And when you are aware of a thought, you kind of even give it a little label, like you start to getting anger. Anger's rising. Anger. Greed. You kind of just label the thought. It will knock the energy out of it, and it will just normally disappear. Because thoughts only stick in our mind when we're not aware of them, and they start carrying us away. By that time, it's much more difficult to shake them off. But if you catch it, nip it in the bud, then the thoughts won't bother you so much. Because that's the power of the mindfulness. Of being able to note it, it brings it out into the light and disappears. It's sort of similar to like cockroaches in your kitchen. I don't know if you got cockroaches in your kitchen, but you know, at night, cockroaches come out and crawl all around the walls when it's dark, right? Then you come in the middle of the night and you turn on the light, they all because they don't like the light. Or if you have a cat sleeping on your kitchen table, and the cat's on the kitchen table watching the baseboards, and a mouse pokes its head out the baseboard, and then the mouse sees the cat watching you, you go back in. But if the mouse pokes his head out the baseboard and sees the cat sleeping, then it'll come out, nibble the cheese, right? So the same way, mindfulness is like the cat. It's awake and alert. Pains are rising over here. Okay, relax around it. No big deal. Sounds occurring over here. It's just sound vibration. Don't worry. Thoughts are rising here. Thoughts just a bubble. Don't worry about it. And that's how it works. That mindfulness, that alertness, short circuits the automatic functioning of the brain process, interrupts that flow of perception and reaction. To give us a split second to consider, do I really need to move now? Is this little pain in my knee going to kill me? Is that little itch on my cheek going to really kill me? And so you'll see that no, and can relax around it and endure it. And when you endure something for a few seconds, you realize it will change and vanish quickly. That's the beauty of impermanence. But anytime something happens, we're just automatically wanting to react. Oh, itch. Oh, here's some. What's that? Hardly without any thought. We don't even know we're doing those things, and they just happen so fast because we're not mindful. And we're not seeing that initial stimulus that's triggering it off because we're not in the body. But if you're centered in the body, you'll see them very clearly, very quickly, much more quickly than normal. That's the whole key there. A lot of people never talk about that, but it's one of the most powerful parts of the meditation practice, especially in mindfulness meditation. So that's why that the getting grounded in the body is really the key and the doorway for being able to successfully manage your thoughts, because the thoughts are coming through the body, basically the nervous system. So that's what I wanted to basically mention to you in this talk, and to understand how all these practices of using the body and all the different standing and and sitting and standing and then walking, and you can develop that in a more continuous basis, because it's always with us and it's always immediately there. So now we've already been going on to some extent, so I'm going to bring this talk to a close. But if anybody has any questions, if somebody had a question there that I didn't answer in the beginning, did you forget about it already? Or? What?
I didn't realize it took 3 to make the baby. The mother and the father.
I mean, you mentioned that there are 3 conditions, 3 factors needed to have a birth of a baby: mother, father, and the incoming consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah. So she thought that only 2 is enough.
Well, that's the Western scientific viewpoint, but that's where the East meets West. They bump heads, especially the idea about rebirth. And the reason why Western science is hampered because of their ignorance and their religious beliefs. And so this belief that consciousness is created within the brain. Now, the mind and the conditioned mind is created within the brain. Like once a baby's born and it starts to make all these connections with, oh, that's daddy, that's mommy, and connecting, this thing brings pleasure, this thing brings pain, and reacting. That's created in the brain, but not the pure consciousness itself. Not the consciousness itself with the link to past life memories and habits and so on, what are called sankhara. And so this is the fundamental difference between Eastern and Western based philosophies and religions. The Buddha wasn't hampered by that. That's why he didn't believe those Hindu sadhus who told him that the realm of infinite space was like God, and you don't need anything more. And so, but the Buddha went beyond it, went beyond those formless jhanas to understand what nibbana was, which is different than just those kind of mental states. And you have a question?
Did you want to finish your thought?
Well, I was going to say one more little story. Want to hear one last little story? Okay, it's connected with this. So there was one time there was a deva, who's like a celestial being that could travel like 100 miles in one step. And he got up one morning and said, I want to find the end of the world. I'm going to go searching for the end of the world. I'm going to go walk and run to find the end of the world. And so he, started going and got kind of lost. And he saw some ascetic there, somebody meditating. Oh, he might know. So he goes and asks, how do I find the end of the world? And he scratches his head. He says, I don't know. Go ask the other one. So he went to 2 or 3 different people like that asking about the end of the world. And they couldn't tell him. Finally, one of them says, why don't you go talk to Mahabrahma? Mahabrahma is the one who created the world, or thinks he created the world. Why don't you go talk to him? He would know how to reach the end of the world, don't you think? Say, oh, that's a great idea. So he went running up to the Brahma Loka, like some heaven world. And this Mahabrahma was standing and giving some talk to all of his lesser little gods. He went up to Mahabrahma and said, tapped him on the shoulder and said, please tell me how to reach the end of the world. Mahabrahma said, shh, don't speak so loudly. My disciples might hear you. I don't know. Go ask the Buddha. So here's Mahabrahma, creator of the world, telling this guy to go ask the Buddha how to find the end of the world. So he goes back and tells his whole story to the Buddha, and the Buddha kind of chuckled under his breath. My dear Rohitisa, you're not going to find the end of the world by physically traveling. And this is when he said one of his most important, profound statements, that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right within this 5 or 6 foot long body with its nervous system, memory, and consciousness. And Rohitisa was able to get it. And so that's the world to the Buddha, not this physical universe, or even this physical earth. The world to the Buddha was, how does our mind create the world? Sure, this physical earth may be there, but the way you experience it is being created in your mind, because people will experience it in a different way. When the baby's born, it doesn't experience this world like you're experiencing it now. But as his brain grows up and starts changing, gradually it will. That ant or your dog doesn't experience this world the same way as you do, does it? But they're living on the earth, right? Go home tonight and talk to your dog or cat, and say, what's up? So even though they're on this earth, their mind is not, they don't know. Because their mind is different. The brain is different. So that is the meaning of it. That the world is our idea of the world. Now, somebody who's in a schizophrenic state or who's having a psychotic break, they don't even know they're on the world now. The people that are in some of these institutions, right? I don't like to talk bad about it, but these are the truth, And their brains stopped functioning or got messed up. And so that's why this idea of the world, and the Buddha said that's where we live, in this mental world. And if you have obsessive compulsive disorders and you think everything is chasing you and you whatever, then you're that's in your mind. Okay. So that's important to understand. And when we meditate, actually to observe how your mind is creating the world from moment to moment, just through memory and then through sensations and through your past conditions. So this is all part of the insight meditation, the vipassana type of meditation and insights that come to you as you're meditating and observing how the mind is observing, the flow of impermanence and how the mind is creating its various thoughts and emotions and how we cling to them and they cause us suffering. All of our thoughts are just basically mental bubbles that are arising within the consciousness. But yet we cling to those bubbles of fear, anxiety, worry, and thinking that they're absolutely real and identify with them. That's me, that's me. And then it does come to affect you. But the whole point through insight, developing insight meditation, is to see how basically it's the mind that is creating all these types of emotions, fears, phobias, and everything else out of basically nothing. Yeah, out of just ignorance, not being taught, and just following what other people have been doing their whole life and so on. But then it's very difficult to get out of that. But all of the Buddha's teaching is about that, about how to extract your consciousness, your pure awareness out of this maze of the tangle. Actually, one more little jingle. Okay, one more. Okay, there's the Buddhist text, the famous Buddhist text called the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification. And it's basically an explanation about the whole of the Buddhist teachings according to the suttas and so on. But it starts out with a little jingle. So somebody came to the Buddha and he said, the inner tangle and the outer tangle, this world is entangled in a tangle. So I asked thee, Master Gautama, who succeeds in disentangling this tangle? And that's when the Buddha gave his reply. When a person is standing on the bedrock of skillful behavior, sila, understanding the law of karma and living in accordance with the law of karma, and then that person develops mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, that person succeeds in disentangling the tangle. Now, from what we've been discussing, what is the outer tangle? Yeah, the physical world. That means visible vibrations. We look around, we see all these different objects. The mind gets tangled up in them. I love that person. I hate that person. I love this kind of food. I hate that kind of food. Sounds. What is the inner tangle? Yes, the conditioned mind. It's the habits that we've created and the attachments or aversions that we've created to all these outer vibrations. And they've all been tangled up like a tangled ball of thread. And so disentangling that, it basically is, it's a tangle of karma, what our karma has created. And disentangling it takes skill. It's like if you ever try to undo knots, probably have with knots, right? Sometimes it's very difficult to get the knot out. It's really tight. You have to get a pin or something, and spend a lot of time, loosening one edge of it, gradually pulling it out. Well, that's the same way in meditation. We're trying to disentangling the tangle of greed, hatred, and delusion that our mind has gotten into to the whole world. And especially the things that keeps those knots tight, which is our clinging. Okay, so we got kind of sidetracked there. So I was going to say that with the questions, if you have any other questions come up, there's going to be some slips of paper. We want to invite you to write down any questions from now until the Q&A session later tonight. To write the questions down, try to write it clearly so I'll be able to read it. And then I'll try to answer those questions. Could be about anything that we covered in this talk or some questions about the meditation practice. And
There's
so,
a box in the registration table together with the pen and papers, so you can write your questions. And doesn't have to be. It can be anonymous. So please feel free to ask questions that will help not only you but many others also. We'll have Q&A session at 7.
yes.
It's at 7:30, Bhante.
Yes.
7:30, actually, they're gonna, yeah, it's not mentioned here, but we're gonna do a little chanting first, only about 5 minutes or so. And then there'll be the Q&A sessions followed by the evening meditation. So right now, I want you to mindfully stand up, and we're gonna do a standing meditation to relieve any discomfort in your legs. So after standing up straight, just try to feel your standing body and do some deep, slow breathing. We did before, just relax your arms to the side. First of all, just try to mentally feel the standing body, starting with your head, with your eyes in the sockets, the head balanced on top. See if you can feel the outline of the body. And just kind of move your attention down to the body from the head. Feel your shoulders, relaxing the shoulders. Feel the clothing touching the skin of the arms and shoulders. Feel your hands and fingers. See if you can notice the outline of your thumbs and individual fingers. Focus on them. You should be able to kind of feel the vague outline of your thumbs or some other fingers. Feel the subtle pulsations in them. Just mentally remember standing. Let the awareness kind of move down your legs. Feel the clothing touching the skin of your legs. Feel your knees. Finally, going down to feel the feet pressing the floor. Try to feel the whole body.